everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. In this video we're going to be talking about Jupiter moving into Pisces, and it's kind of a pretty big deal. Anytime one of our outer planets changes sign, it usually signifies a pretty significant shift in the energy of that sign, and this transit's going to be no exception because Jupiter is going to be moving from the fixed air sign of Aquarius into the mutable water sign of Pisces. And Pisces is really a nice place for Jupiter to be moving through. In fact, Jupiter is considered to be exalted in Pisces. It's actually the traditional or ancient ruler of Pisces. Before the discovery of Neptune, Jupiter was considered to rule both Pisces and Sagittarius. But then we had to give Neptune its own house. So Jupiter was generous enough to let Neptune take over Pisces, and it took sole ownership of Sagittarius, if you will. But, you know, it still has, it's like a vacation home. It's like a second home for Jupiter. And Neptune, it invites Jupiter into Pisces with open arms. And it's a place where Jupiter is really quite at home. You can think about it as if Sagittarius represents the masculine fire yang side of Jupiter's personality, well, when it moves into Pisces, it gets to express its more feminine, watery yin side, which is a really nice expression of the Jupiter energy. If we think about what Jupiter is, it's that expansive quality. It's growth-oriented. It's generous. It's jovial. It's playful. It's spiritual. You know, it's worldly. It's curious. It has all of these. It brings good fortune, right? So if we think about Jupiter, and I always think about Jupiter and Pisces, it reminds me of the fact that in Vedic astrology, Jupiter is called Guru, right? Which is wisdom, the wise teacher. And I feel like Jupiter and Pisces does give me that guru energy. Like, I really want to know, I want to understand, I want to go deeper, and not just, you know, the philosophical aspects of Jupiter when it's in Sagittarius. I think when Jupiter is in Pisces, it gets into the deep heart wisdom, the emotionally felt, embodied feeling of enlightenment, really. So no small wonder that a lot of people, especially astrologers, are really excited about Jupiter's ingress into Pisces. Happens every 12 years. So, but a little asterisk to this is that it's going to be a bit short-lived because Jupiter is going to station retrograde right after it moves in, sometime in late June, and then start to move backwards. So it's only going to be in Pisces for a short time, only about a couple months really, and then it's going to move back into Aquarius and retrograde over these degrees that it's been traveling through over the course of the recent months. So anytime a planet goes retrograde, it's always this revisit, revise, reform type of energy that we have to deal with. So while we'll be moving into Pisces and we're going to get this really hopeful, optimistic sensibility over the next couple months, it's going to be short-lived, and it's just going to be a glimmer, as I'll likely call this video. We're dipping our toes in the waters of spiritual renewal, and it really is just a toe dipping, because we're going to have to come back into Aquarius for the rest of the year, and sort of there's some I's to dot and some T's to cross. And I'm going to talk about what that might mean as we look at the charts here. I think there's a strong connection with Jupiter's move through Aquarius and the rollout of the COVID vaccines. I think there's a very direct correlation to that. So that's something that may help us orient ourselves to this cycle. But of course, it's also working all the way down to the individual level. And we're all going to get a little glimmer of hope, which I think we all would look forward to and invite and welcome. So let's take a look at the chart and see what's going on here. And I've got the Sky Now map up. So here we are on May 7th, where I'm recording this video. And we can see Jupiter is in the last degrees of Aquarius, hanging out here at 29 degrees. and it's been moving through Aquarius with its buddy Saturn, right? Saturn has moved from 13 degrees, and if we remember on the solstice last year, we had that great conjunction that we talked so much about that really set the tone for 2021 and setting the tone for really a 20-year cycle that was initiated with that conjunction. It occurred at 0 Aquarius. And since then, Jupiter has moved almost twice as fast as Saturn. It's separated itself. Saturn's over at 13 degrees, Jupiter at 29. And so this entire year, 2021 so far, has been characterized by, in many ways, this movement through Aquarius. And it's important to note that Jupiter has been moving through Aquarius and before that Capricorn for the last 2 years. And it's been a pretty intense, it's an intense part of the zodiac. It's an intense part of the cycle for Jupiter to move through. Because if you consider that, 3 years ago, back in 2018, let's just do that for grins and giggles here. If we go back to, 2018 and sometime in 2019, Jupiter was moving through Sagittarius, its own sign. And that was the last time Jupiter was really comfortable. And we could say what we will about 2018, 2019, but boy, was it a different world than 2020, right? It was maybe the peak of just this exuberance and travel and housing and, the whole technology issues. I think about we were all traveling everywhere and vacationing, and everyone was buying a second home and renting it out on Airbnb, right? It was really an expansive time if we can look at it with some hindsight. But once 2020 came, I'm just going to go a month at a time here so we can see earlier, right? When Jupiter moved into Capricorn at the end of 2019, it was about to encounter our old friend Pluto over here, who's been hanging out in Capricorn since 2008. And this really was the configuration that was the blew up the world, really, right? This is the COVID configuration of 2020. All of these planets in Capricorn. And this was the thing that we were worried about as astrologers. I think I started looking at this configuration a good 10 years ago. I think from 2012 onward, as you looked forward, and this is one of the things I always advocate why astrology is so useful, so practically useful, because it gives us foresight as well as hindsight, right? We can look forward and anticipate what's coming. We can also look back and go, okay, what was it that we anticipated? How did that show up? What did we get right? What did we get wrong? How do we now integrate that into our understanding of what's now currently happening? That's what I think astrology is really super useful for. It's what I like to use it for, both in my life personally, and I think it also helps you to orient and understand what's going on, the big picture going on in the world. So, my point being is that since the end of 2019, all the way up until now, Jupiter has been moving through Capricorn, which is a Saturn-ruled sign. So not a great place for Jupiter to be its fun-loving self. It's like, oh, we got to work hard. It's about limit and structure. And so Jupiter just kind of goes, okay, it's sort of a grin and bear it type of time for Jupiter, I think, archetypally as I think about it. And then, moving into Aquarius, as it did at the end of 2020 and into 2021, all right, it's a little bit of a shift, but still not ideal, right? And I feel like Jupiter is having to work through that Aquarian modality in a very scientific, rational way. And I want to bring up, this would be a good time to jump over, as I said, I'm calling this dipping our toes in the waters of renewal. And I think that's an interesting way of thinking about this first couple of months of the Jupiter transit into Pisces. But I think about the archetype of Jupiter in Aquarius that we have been experiencing, right? What's been going on as Jupiter has moved through that sign over the last 5 months, really? Well, Jupiter's, as we said, that expansive, optimistic, hopeful, future-oriented energy is working through the Aquarius qualities of, this detached. It's that air sign. It's more of a idealistic. It wants to use reason. Also very future oriented. But I think there's a few things that really stand out to me about what Aquarius represents. If we think of it as scientific, technological, and humanitarian, right? Aquarius does have these really high ideals about making a better society, but it wants to do it in a very rational, scientific method type of approach. And so to me, the rollout of the vaccines is really the perfect combination of these archetypal configurations. It's this global effort of expansive to be optimistic and hopeful about taking on a scientific problem, a scientific challenge. And these new vaccines are very Aquarian, right? Which is ruled by Uranus. It's a very sudden new technology. It's not the way we've traditionally made vaccines. So there's something very technologically innovative and revolutionary and progressive about this particular vaccination program. And it has been a worldwide global effort. So a real interesting resonance between these two archetypes. And it's really interesting when then you start to consider, okay, what does Jupiter look like as it moves into Pisces? Well, now you get a much different archetypal configuration. We move from the scientific in Aquarius to the spiritual in Pisces, right? We move from the fixed air of Aquarius to the mutable water of Pisces. So now this expansive, optimistic, hopeful Jupiterian energy is getting to express itself in the warm waters of Pisces, of a spiritual, soulful, emotive way, right? It can be Pisces is very creative. It's often associated with the arts, particularly with film and music. It has this real ethereal quality to it. The sense of compassion and gentleness, kindness, love, right? I mean, when you combine Jupiter, you can start to see, okay, Jupiter starts to feel really comfortable and expressive. As I said, getting to express that yin, feminine, watery side of his personality really starts to paint a much rosier picture of what we can expect for the next 2 months. So this is, not surprising that as astrologers, we're really looking forward to this 2-month window going, some hope, some relief, something that we can really indulge in and enjoy and participate in. And that's certainly going to be true. But of course, it's going to be short-lived because we're going to have to retreat out of that and move back into Aquarius. So just as quickly as we get this sense of spiritual renewal, right, this hopeful, optimistic, of course, we always want to say, it's worth pointing out here that just as much as we can show the lighter side and the most highest combination of these two archetypes, there's always the potential for them to mutually reinforce their more shadow-like qualities. So we can see where Jupiter on a negative side can be a little overindulgent and too excessive. And when you combine that with Pisces and its sort of shadow qualities of being a little escapist, it can be confused, it can be vague, it can be a little overindulgent itself. It can have this deceptive quality to it. Well, here where, this is one of the reasons why I think, Pisces is often associated with addictions, with drug and alcohol addictions, because if you think about Pisces and those high ideals, right, a lot of times we can't live up to the Pisces ideal. We get disappointed. We get disillusioned. And so we want to escape away into the fantasy. And sometimes drugs and alcohol can offer us that escape. So if you combine Jupiter's penchant for excess with Pisces' tendency to retreat into escapist forms of addiction, it's pretty scary, right? That you can really get lost in this energy. So I just say that to just as a caution against, we're always super, starry-eyed, like, oh, Jupiter and Pisces, well, what could be better? Well, at its best, not much. Like, really is something to really enjoy and to really unfold into, to really allow the heart to open up in the biggest and greatest ways possible. That super compassionate, heartfelt love and joy energy. But that shadowy negative side can just as easily manifest if we're not conscious of it, if we're not aware of it. So it always takes conscious awareness to really work within these archetypes in the most powerful, proactive way, growth-oriented, right? We want to grow in the right direction. We want to grow towards the light. We don't want to grow into the darkness of what this could configure. So just note of caution there. But just keep in mind that this is going to be, unfortunately, a little short-lived. It's a preview. It's dipping our toes in, because we are going to have to retreat into this Aquarius energy once that retrograde starts. And by July, Jupiter will have moved back into the sign of Aquarius. And so, like I said, repeat, redo, revise, relive. We're going to have to go back. There's something we probably haven't gotten right. Intellectually, scientifically, technically. There will be some redos going on. And this applies to us as individuals as well as the collective. So, if you've had to expand, as many of us have, our work lives, which have become much more Aquarian, haven't they? They're much more technically, scientifically mediated in many ways. We may feel like, oh, we figured all that out, and we're really starting to make money and figuring out how to adjust our lives and to live in harmony with that modality. Could be some stuff still to be worked out there. And I really do, my intuition tells me that this connection with the whole vaccination process, how we're dealing with COVID-19, the sense that I think it's not going out on a limb to think that there are going to be more continued variants. I think most of the scientific insight points in that direction. Whether it's going to be the need for updated or revised vaccination formulas to deal with variants, whether it's the need for booster shots. I don't think we're quite out of the woods yet, because, this dipping of our toes into Pisces, it's going to give us this hope. We are going to feel this palpable shift, and we are going to be ready to move on with it. But then when Jupiter goes retrograde, and it's like, not so fast. We got to go back. We got to deal with some of the unfinished business of this Jupiter and Aquarius part of the cycle before we can then, later in the year, move forward in earnest. So by October, November, and into December, we'll start to get back to where we're going to be in the next week. So that's why we're calling it a preview. That's why we're dipping our toes in the water. So I want to end the video there. I think that's enough. I think in the next week, hopefully, we'll revisit this topic, maybe take a look at where this might be showing up for all of us by our rising or our sun sign. We'll go maybe through the 12 signs and the 12 houses and see where this shift is playing out in your chart. So where you can expect to feel that shift, and then where it's going to go back to and relive. And so we can get a better handle, maybe for us personally, on how we're going to use this Jupiter shifting energy to the best benefit that we really can. Because you really want to do, Jupiter's such a great, it's the great beneficent, the greater beneficent, as we call it in astrology, along with Venus. Those two planets, Venus is sort of the yummy planet. I think if you want to use that term, right? Venus is pretty yummy. And I would say Jupiter is like kind of amazing, right? It's the kind of amazing planet. It really does want us to have all that our hearts desire. And Jupiter in Pisces really is expanding the heart's desire. So lots to look forward to. Hopefully a glimmer of hope, and we can all leverage this energy shift in the best possible way. So again, hopefully this was helpful and enjoyable and inspiring. If you like the content, always ask that you like and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to grow what we're trying to do here with Astrolab. Clicking the notification bell always helps so that you'll be alerted when I do put out new content. And also invite you to leave comments. I really do appreciate and enjoy the comments. Let me know what you like and what you don't like, other things you might like to see, your comments on the subject matter. A lot of times you guys have great insights into some of this stuff, and it's really helpful for me to hear that feedback, and I can always incorporate it into my subsequent videos that I do. So keep it up, appreciate it, and appreciate you. All right, till next time, folks. Satnam.